The fluorescent lights in Morrison's diner buzzed like insects trapped in a jar, casting their sickly yellow glow across cracked vinyl booths and laminate tables that had seen better decades. Claire Montgomery moved between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to conserve every ounce of energy, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the checkered floor. The pink and white uniform hung loose on her frame, a size too large because the smaller one had cost $15 more. She refilled coffee cups without being asked, cleared plates before customers had fully pushed them aside, smiled when her face wanted to crumble. The clock above the kitchen window read 9:47, 2 hours and 13 minutes until her shift ended. Then she could go home, count her tips, and discover whether she'd be short $50 or $100 for rent that was due in 3 days. A trucker at table 6 snapped his fingers at her. Claire swallowed the flash of irritation and approached with the coffee pot. "About time," he muttered, not looking up from his phone. "Service here gets worse every week." She poured carefully, said nothing, moved on. The tips from difficult customers spent the same as tips from kind ones. She had learned not to waste emotion on things that wouldn't change. The dinner rush had ended an hour ago, leaving only the stragglers. A couple sharing a milkshake in the corner booth. An elderly man working on a crossword puzzle, making his single cup of coffee last as long as possible. Claire understood that strategy. She had done the same thing when she was studying, back when she still believed nursing school would save her life instead of burying her under debt she couldn't climb out from under. Her manager, Steve, emerged from the kitchen with his perpetual scowl. "Table 3's been waiting for their check for 10 minutes. Claire glanced at table 3. The couple was still eating. "They just got their food 8 minutes ago," she said quietly. "Don't talk back, just do your job." Steve disappeared back into the kitchen, probably to his office, where he watched sports on his phone and called it inventory management. Claire printed the check anyway, left it face down at the table's edge. Pick your battles, save your energy. Survive until tomorrow. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She waited until she was in the narrow hallway by the restrooms before checking it. A text from her mother's neighbor. "Your mom had a bad spell this afternoon. Wouldn't take her medicine. Says it costs too much. You need to talk to her." Claire leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, counted to 10. The insurance covered most of her mother's medications, but the new blood pressure prescription was $240 a month. Margaret Montgomery had stopped filling it 6 weeks ago without telling her daughter, insisting she felt fine, that Claire was working too hard already. Yesterday, her mother's doctor had called. The numbers were climbing. Without the medication, they were looking at stroke risk, kidney damage, a cascade of complications that would make everything so much worse. $240, plus the $340 she was short for rent, plus the electric bill that had a disconnect notice attached, plus the $70 in overdraft fees from last month that she hadn't been able to clear. Claire opened her eyes. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and old grease. She typed back, "I'll come by tomorrow. Make sure she takes what she has left. I'll handle it." She had no idea how she would handle it. The last 2 hours of her shift blurred together. More coffee, more forced smiles, more dishes cleared and tables wiped down. At 11:30, she cashed out her tips in the back office. $43. On a good night, she made 70. Steve didn't look up from his phone. "You're closing Saturday." "I'm already scheduled Saturday morning." "So you'll do a double," Jen called out. It wasn't a question. Claire wanted to argue that she'd already worked 6 days straight, that she was scheduled for the morning shift Sunday too, that human beings needed sleep. Instead, she said, "Okay." Steve grunted. She took it as dismissal. The November air bit through her thin jacket as she stepped outside. The diner sat on a corner where the commercial district bled into residential neighborhoods that had been declining for 20 years. Street lights illuminated empty sidewalks and closed storefronts. Claire pulled her jacket tighter and started walking. Her apartment was 14 blocks away. She had a car, technically, but it had been sitting in her building's lot with an expired registration for 3 months. The inspection had failed for brake problems that would cost more to fix than the vehicle was worth. Another problem without a solution, so she walked. The route took her past the darkened windows of a check-cashing place, a dollar store, a bar with neon beer signs that flickered like dying stars. A group of men stood outside the bar smoking and laughing. Claire crossed to the other side of the street without breaking stride. Don't make eye contact. Don't draw attention. Be invisible. Halfway home, she passed the hospital where her sister had died. Claire didn't look up at the building, but she felt it there, looming against the night sky. Emma had been 19. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Diagnosed too late, treatment too expensive, time too short. Claire had been 23 and in her second year of nursing school, working part-time, watching her sister fade while bills piled up like accusations. She had dropped out to work full-time, to help with costs, to be present. It hadn't mattered. Emma had died on a Tuesday morning in March, while Claire was asleep in a chair beside her bed, too exhausted to keep her eyes open any longer. That was 3 years ago. The hospital bills were still in collections. Claire sent them $50 a month, a gesture that barely touched the principal, but kept the lawyers from calling quite as often. She climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, fishing keys from her pocket. The hallway smelled like cooking and mildew. Inside, her studio was dark and cold. She had turned the heat down to 55 degrees to save money. Her breath misted in the air as she flipped on the single lamp. The space was small enough that she could see everything from the doorway. Futon against one wall, kitchenette along the other, bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. Clean, though. She kept it clean. Control what you can control. Claire dropped her bag on the counter and pulled out her tips. $43 in bills and coins, laid out carefully. She opened the drawer where she kept her rent money, counted what was there. $260. Rent was $600, due Friday. She had one more shift before then. If tomorrow was better than tonight, if she made $70, she would still be short by more than $200. The landlord had already warned her last month. One more late payment and he would start eviction proceedings. Claire sat on the edge of her futon and let her head fall into her hands. For just a moment, alone in the cold apartment, she let herself feel the weight of it, the exhaustion that lived in her bones, the fear that followed her like a shadow, the grinding, relentless pressure of trying to survive on wages that would never be enough, no matter how many hours she worked. Then she lifted her head, squared her shoulders, and stood up. Self-pity was a luxury she couldn't afford. She changed into her sleep clothes, set her alarm for 6, climbed under the thin blanket. Tomorrow she would work the morning shift. Then she would visit her mother. Then she would come home and figure out which bill to pay first, which crisis to address, which problem to solve while others waited their turn. Just make it through one more day. That was the goal. That was always the goal. Claire closed her eyes and waited for sleep to bring temporary relief from the life she was living. She didn't know that tomorrow night, everything would change. The next evening arrived with the same exhausted routine. Claire's morning shift had been unremarkable except for the steady ache in her feet and the $72 in tips that felt like a small miracle. Still short for rent, but closer. Always chasing closer without quite arriving. She had visited her mother during the afternoon gap between shifts. Margaret had looked smaller somehow. Sitting in her new private room at Riverside Care Facility, with afternoon light streaming through actual curtains instead of the institutional blinds at the old place. The visit had been strange. Her mother kept asking careful questions about Claire's new job, the one that apparently paid well enough to afford this upgraded facility that Claire definitely could not afford. Claire had deflected, changed subjects, promised everything was fine. Her mother had looked unconvinced but too tired to push. The nurse had mentioned the new blood pressure medication was already showing results. Claire had nodded and smiled and felt the weight of a lie she didn't understand yet. Now she was back at Morrison's diner for the closing shift, wiping down tables, while Steve counted the register in the back office. The dinner crowd had thinned to nothing. Just Claire and the buzzing fluorescent lights, and the growing certainty that something was wrong. The black SUV had been parked across the street since 8:47. She had noticed it while refilling the coffee station, noticed it again when she took out the trash, noticed it a third time when she flipped the sign to closed at 11:30. The vehicle sat under a broken streetlight, dark and expensive and completely out of place in this neighborhood. Claire locked the front door with hands that wanted to shake. She told herself it was nothing. Rich people got lost sometimes. Someone was waiting to pick up a passenger. There were a dozen explanations that didn't involve danger. She was reaching for her jacket when the diner's door rattled. Someone was pulling on it, despite the closed sign, despite the darkness of half the interior lights already switched off. Claire froze. Through the glass, she could see a man in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his head shaved smooth, his expression patient and professional in a way that made her stomach clench. He knocked. 3 precise raps. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide in the back office, to call for Steve, who had already left through the rear exit 10 minutes ago. Instead, she stayed still, hoping he would give up and leave. The man pulled out his phone, held it up to the glass. On the screen was a photograph. Claire's breath caught. The image showed a small boy in a hospital bed, tubes and wires surrounding him, his face pale and his eyes enormous. The man lowered the phone and mouthed through the glass, "Please." Against every survival instinct she possessed, Claire walked to the door. She didn't unlock it, but she came close enough to talk through the barrier. "We're closed," she said. "I know." His voice was deep and steady, carrying through the glass with surprising clarity. "My name is Jackson Reeves. I need 5 minutes of your time. It's about my employer's son." "I don't know your employer." "No, but he needs someone like you." Jackson glanced over his shoulder at the empty street, then back to her. "That boy in the picture is 7 years old. His name is Owen. He has severe kidney disease. His regular nurse had to leave town for a family emergency, and we need someone with medical training to sit with him overnight. Just tonight. Just to make sure he's stable." Claire shook her head. "I'm not a nurse. I didn't finish school. But you have training. You know what to watch for, what matters. Please." Jackson pulled out a wallet, extracted a stack of bills, held them up to the glass. $2,000, cash, for 1 night of work, 8 hours. You sit with him, monitor his vitals, call for help if something changes. That's all. $2,000. The number ricocheted through Claire's mind like a bullet. That was rent, her mother's medication, the electric bill, groceries, everything she needed with money left over. For 1 night of babysitting a sick child, which meant it was absolutely a trap, a scam, something dangerous dressed up as opportunity. "I can't," Claire said. Jackson's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Desperation, maybe, or genuine fear for a child who needed help. "His father is willing to pay because he's run out of options he trusts," Jackson said quietly. "Every agency nurse, every professional caregiver, they all have backgrounds that can be traced, patterns that can be predicted. But you." He gestured at her, at the diner, at the life she was visibly living. "You're someone who acts on instinct, someone who cares because that's who you are, not because it's a job. You don't know anything about me. I know you send $50 a month to hospital collections for your sister's bills. I know you work 70-hour weeks and can barely make rent. I know you visit your mother every week, even though it costs bus fare you don't have." Jackson's voice remained gentle, stating facts without judgment. "I know you're exactly the kind of person who would help a sick child if you weren't too afraid." Claire's hands clenched at her sides. The fact that this stranger knew so much about her should have sent her running. Instead, it just made her tired. Privacy was another luxury for people with different lives. "What's really going on?" she asked. "Owen needs help. His father needs someone trustworthy. You need money. Sometimes things are exactly what they appear to be. And sometimes they're much worse." Jackson nodded slowly. "Yes, sometimes they are. But tonight, right now, there's a little boy who can't sleep because he's scared and in pain, and the person who usually helps him isn't there. I'm asking you to sit with him for 8 hours, nothing more." Claire looked at the money still pressed against the glass. $2,000. She thought about her mother's medication, the eviction notice that would come if she missed rent again, the endless treadmill of working and struggling and never getting ahead. She thought about Emma in that hospital bed, how Claire would have given anything for someone to care, to stay, to help when everything was falling apart. "Just sitting with him," she said. "Nothing else. Nothing else. And if I don't like the situation, I can leave." Jackson hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "You can leave." That hesitation told her everything. This was a mistake. She was going to regret this. but she was also going to do it anyway, because desperation made people do stupid things, and she had been desperate for 3 years. Claire unlocked the door. The drive took 20 minutes through parts of the city that gradually transformed from worn down to working class to something else entirely. Jackson didn't speak much, just confirmed she had her phone, asked if she had allergies or medical conditions that might be relevant, explained basic details about Owen's condition in terms she understood. The boy was on dialysis every other night. He took 8 different medications. He had dietary restrictions and fluid limits. He was small for his age, often in pain, and scared of being alone. His mother had died 4 years ago. His father worked unusual hours. Unusual hours, Claire repeated. Jackson's expression remained neutral. Mr. Kane is a businessman. His schedule is unpredictable. They turned onto a street lined with gates and walls, properties that sprawled behind barriers designed to keep the outside world at a distance. Jackson pulled up to an iron gate, entered a code, waited for it to swing open. The mansion beyond looked like something from a different universe than the one Claire inhabited. Modern architecture, all clean lines and expensive materials, security lights illuminating manicured grounds. Through the windows, she could see the glow of interior lighting, the suggestion of space and wealth that made her studio apartment feel even smaller in retrospect. "This way," Jackson said, leading her through a side entrance that bypassed the main house. They walked down a corridor with polished floors and artwork that was probably real. He stopped at a door, knocked softly, then opened it. The room beyond was large and comfortable, but it had been transformed into something between a bedroom and a medical facility. Hospital-grade monitors sat on sleek furniture. An IV pole stood in the corner. The bed was regular-sized, but equipped with rails, and in it sat a small boy reading a book that looked too advanced for someone so young. Owen Kane looked up as they entered. His eyes were gray and enormous in his thin face, his dark hair falling across his forehead. He wore pajamas with planets on them, and had the kind of fragile appearance that came from bodies working too hard just to function. "Owen, this is Claire," Jackson said gently. "She's going to sit with you tonight while Nina is away." Owen studied her with an intensity that felt adult. "You're not a regular nurse." "No," Claire said honestly, moving closer but not crowding. "I'm not, but I know about medicine and I'm a good listener." "Do you know about kidneys?" "Some. I know they're supposed to filter your blood and make urine, and I know yours aren't working the way they should." Owen nodded seriously. "They only work at 17%. That's why I need dialysis. Do you know what dialysis is? It's a machine that does the filtering your kidneys can't do anymore." "Exactly." Owen seemed satisfied by her knowledge. He glanced at Jackson. "She can stay." Jackson's relief was nearly invisible, but Claire caught it. He showed her where the medication chart was, where the emergency numbers were posted, how to reach him or the on-call doctor if needed. Owen's next dialysis session wasn't until tomorrow eve. So tonight was just monitoring and medication management. His 1045 doses are already prepared, Jackson said, gesturing to a small tray on the bedside table. "Pills in a cup, juice in a glass, everything measured and ready." Claire nodded, but something made her pause. She picked up the juice glass, sniffed it, set it down. Then she picked up the medication cup, counted the pills, compared them to the chart on the wall. "What is it?" Jackson asked. Claire looked at Owen's chart more carefully. Weight, current medications, dialysis schedule, dietary restrictions. Her incomplete nursing education kicked in, connecting dots that suddenly formed a very wrong picture. She picked up the juice glass again. "What kind of juice is this?" "Orange juice," Jackson said. "Why?" Claire's heart started beating faster. She looked at the pills, then at Owen, then back at Jackson. Owen's potassium levels are already elevated according to this chart. Orange juice is high in potassium, and this medication. She held up one of the pills. "This dosage is wrong for his weight. It's nearly double what it should be." Jackson went very still. "Nina prepared those." Then Nina made a mistake. Claire looked at Owen, who was watching with growing alarm. "Don't drink that juice, Owen, and don't take these pills yet." She said it calmly, but inside her mind was racing through pharmacology lessons from 3 years ago. Potassium and kidneys and the cardiac complications of getting the balance wrong. She might be wrong. She probably was wrong. But if she was right, and Owen consumed what had been prepared for him, the combination could trigger arrhythmia or worse. "Don't drink that." The words came out sharper this time, more urgent, as Owen reached for the juice out of habit. The door opened, a man entered, and the entire room changed. He was tall and dark-haired and carried himself with the kind of presence that made Jackson look small by comparison. His suit was immaculate, his expression carved from stone, and his eyes landed on Claire with an intensity that made her want to step backward. Behind him came a woman Claire assumed was Nina, the nurse, looking confused by the gathering in her patient's room. The man's voice was quiet and dangerous. "What's going on?" Owen started crying, and Claire realized she had just accused someone of attempting to poison a child in front of what was clearly a very powerful and very angry father. Claire's mouth went dry as the man moved into the room with controlled precision that reminds her of predators in nature documentaries. Everything about him radiated power and barely restrained violence, from the way his shoulders filled the doorway to the coldness in his gray eyes as they swept from his crying son to the juice glass in Claire's hand. "I asked a question," he said, his voice dropping even quieter. In Claire's experience, quiet anger was far more dangerous than loud. Jackson stepped forward. "Mr. Kane, this is Claire Montgomery, the temporary caregiver I arranged." She noticed an issue with Owen's medication dosage. An issue? Victor Kane's attention fixed on Claire like a spotlight. "Explain." Claire's hands trembled, but she forced her voice steady. "Medical facts. Stick to medical facts. Owen's chart shows elevated potassium levels from his last blood work 3 days ago. The juice prepared for him is orange juice, which is high in potassium. Additionally, this medication." She held up the pill bottle from the tray, making herself meet those cold eyes. "The dosage is too high for his current weight and kidney function. The combination could cause dangerous cardiac complications." Nina made a sound of protest. "I've been managing Owen's care for 2 years. I know what I'm doing." "Then you made a mistake tonight," Claire said, hating how her voice wavered, but pushing through. "Or the chart is wrong, but something doesn't match." Victor moved to the bedside table, picked up the medication bottle, read the label. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he looked at his son, who had stopped crying, but was watching everything with frightened confusion. "Owen," Victor said, his voice transforming into something gentle that shocked Claire with its contrast. "Did you take any of this yet?" Owen shook his head. "Claire told me not to. She said, don't drink that." Victor's eyes closed for just a moment. Something that might have been relief, or might have been rage, flickering across his features. When he opened them, they locked onto Nina. "You prepared this?" "Yes, the same way I always do." "I don't understand what she's talking about." Nina reached for the medication bottle. "Let me see." Victor didn't hand it to her. Instead, he pulled out his phone, dialed, waited 2 rings. "Dr. Levitt, I need you at the house immediately." "No, now." He hung up without waiting for confirmation. "This is ridiculous," Nina said, but her voice had taken on a thin quality. "I've never made an error with Owen's medications. She's been here for 20 minutes, and suddenly she's an expert?" Claire wanted to shrink away from the attention, but she made herself stand straight. "I'm not an expert. I just read the chart and compared it to what was prepared. The numbers don't work." Jackson moved closer to Nina in a way that looked casual, but effectively blocked her path to the door. Nina noticed, and something flickered across her face. Fear, Claire thought, or guilt. Victor sat on the edge of his son's bed, his large frame somehow managing to look gentle beside the small boy. "Owen, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. From when Nina gave you your 8 o'clock medications." Owen glanced at Nina, then back to his father. "She gave me the normal pills. Then she said she had to make a phone call and went to her room." Jackson brought Claire. Then Claire looked at the juice and the pills and said something was wrong. "Did Nina say anything unusual tonight? Act differently?" Owen shook his head. "She was on her phone more, but she's always on her phone." The doorbell rang somewhere in the house. Within minutes, an older man carrying a medical bag entered the room, taking in the scene with quick, assessing eyes. Victor handed him the medication bottle and explained in terse sentences what Claire had noticed. Dr. Levitt examined the bottle, checked Owen's chart, did some mental calculation. His expression darkened. This dosage is wrong, significantly wrong. For a child with Owen's kidney function and current potassium levels, this amount combined with high potassium juice could trigger hyperkalemia and potentially fatal arrhythmia. The room went silent, except for Owen's frightened breathing. Nina's face had gone white. I didn't mean to make a mistake. I've been so tired, I must have grabbed the wrong bottle from the supply cabinet. Claire noticed what the others might have missed. The medication bottle's safety seal had been broken, but then carefully pressed back together. You didn't break safety seals by accident when measuring out pills. You broke them when opening a new bottle. This bottle had been opened, tampered with, and resealed. The seal was broken, Claire said quietly. Dr. Levitt checked. His eyes met Victor's. A wordless communication passed between them. Victor stood slowly. Jackson, take Owen to the guest suite. Stay with him. Dr. Levitt, please examine him fully and ensure nothing was administered that shouldn't have been. Dad? Owen's voice was small and scared. Victor's expression softened immediately. You're safe, son. Claire caught a mistake before anything bad happened. Uncle Jax is going to stay with you while I handle some business. I'll come check on you soon. Jackson moved to the bed, scooping up Owen with practiced ease. The boy buried his face in Jackson's shoulder as they left the room, Dr. Levitt following, which left Claire, Victor, and Nina in suddenly oppressive silence. Victor walked to the door, locked it. The click echoed like a gunshot. Nina started talking fast. I swear it was an accident. I've been working double shifts. I'm exhausted. I must have miscalculated. Please, Mr. Kane, I would never hurt Owen intentionally. Show me your phone, Victor said. What? No, that's private. Show me your phone, or Jackson will find it when he searches your room. Your choice. Nina's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. Victor took it, scrolled through messages, his face betraying nothing. Then he found something that made him stop. He read in silence for long seconds. When he looked up, his eyes were empty of anything human. How much did they pay you? Nina's knees buckled. She grabbed the wall for support. I didn't have a choice. They have my daughter. They said if I didn't do it, they'd kill Sophie. Please, you have to understand. They threatened to kill my daughter. Claire's stomach turned over. This wasn't negligence. This was attempted murder. Victor's voice remained eerily calm. Who are they? I don't know names. A man contacted me 6 days ago. Showed me pictures of Sophie at her college. Gay said all I had to do was adjust Owen's medication one time, make it look like an accident. Then they'd pay me and leave my daughter alone. Where's Sophie now? I don't know. She stopped answering my calls 3 days ago. I thought maybe she was just busy with finals, but then they sent me a picture of her tied up, and I knew they were serious. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call. I need a location on Sophie Valdez, 22 years old. Student at Central State University. Immediate priority. He hung up, turned back to Nina. You've worked in my house for 2 years. You've cared for my son. And when someone threatened you, instead of coming to me, you decided to poison a 7-year-old child. I didn't know what else to do. Nina was crying now, mascara running down her face. You're a dangerous man, Mr. Kane. Everyone knows that. I thought maybe they were more dangerous. They were wrong. Victor's tone could have frozen blood. Jackson will escort you to a secure room. You'll stay there until we locate your daughter. Then we'll have a longer conversation about choices and consequences. He unlocked the door, opened it. Jackson was waiting in the hallway, as if he'd known he'd be needed. He took Nina by the arm, gentle but absolutely firm, and led her away. Her sobs echoed down the corridor. Victor closed the door again, turned to Claire. She had been forgotten in the drama of the last few minutes, pressed against the wall, trying to be invisible. Now his full attention focused on her, and she understood viscerally why people feared this man. You saved my son's life tonight, he said. Claire couldn't read his tone. I just noticed the numbers didn't match. Most people wouldn't have checked. They would have trusted that everything was prepared correctly. He moved closer. Not threatening, but overwhelming simply by proximity. Why did you check? I don't know. Something felt off. Instinct. Maybe. Victor studied her face like he was memorizing every detail. Jackson did a background check on you. I know about your sister, your debts, your unfinished nursing degree. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for barely enough money to survive. I know you're one bad month away from losing everything. Claire's spine stiffened. Then you know I can't afford trouble. So I'll take my $2,000 and leave and forget this ever happened. No. The single word hit like a physical blow. You stopped an assassination attempt tonight, Victor continued, his voice quiet and factual. Whoever paid Nina knows someone interfered. They may not have your name yet, but they will. You think you can go back to your studio apartment and your diner job and pretend this didn't happen? Terror swept through Claire's chest. I didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right, which makes you a witness, a complication, and potentially a target. He pulled out his phone again, showed her a photograph. A young woman bound to a chair, terrified but alive. This is Sophie. My people found her 20 minutes ago in a warehouse downtown. She's being extracted now. Claire stared at the image, her mind struggling to process how quickly everything had moved. I'm offering you a job, Victor said. $15,000 per week to serve as Owen's overnight caretaker. You'll live here, in the secure wing. Your mother will be moved to the best private care facility in the city, all expenses covered. Your debts will be cleared. In exchange, you take care of my son from 8 at night until 8 in the morning, 7 days a week. That's insane. That's necessary. Someone wants Owen dead. Every professional I hire can be traced, bribed, or threatened. But you acted on instinct tonight. You have something I can't buy. What? You genuinely care. Victor's expression shifted slightly, something almost human breaking through. Owen needs that, and I need someone watching him who will notice when something's wrong. Claire shook her head. I can't live in a criminal's house. I'm a businessman. With enemies who kidnap people and poison children. Yes. He didn't deny it, didn't prettify it, which is exactly why Owen needs you. 1 week trial. If you hate it, you leave with enough money to solve your immediate problems. If you stay, you'll never have to count tips or skip meals again. It was everything she needed and everything she feared wrapped in one impossible offer. I need to think about it, Claire said. You have until morning. Jackson will drive you home, collect you at 7 tomorrow evening if you agree. If you don't, you'll be paid for tonight and we part ways. Victor moved to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you have good instincts. My son is alive because you trusted them. Thank you. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Claire stood alone in the medical room, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She had come here for $2,000 and 1 night of work. She was leaving with a choice that would change everything. Claire barely slept. She lay in her cold studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, watching dawn creep across the walls while her mind circled the sane impossible decision. $15,000 per week. Her mother in proper care, debts erased. All she had to do was live in the home of a man whose enemies poisoned children and kidnapped college students to ensure compliance. At 6 in the morning, she checked her bank account on her phone. $2,000 had been deposited during the night. Payment for services rendered, no matter what she decided next. She thought about Owen's gray eyes, so much older than 7 years should allow. The way he had explained his kidney function like a science lesson, clinical and detached from the reality that his body was failing him. The fear on his face when the adults had started arguing, when safety became uncertain again. Claire had promised herself after Emma died that she would never watch another child suffer if she had power to prevent it. She had failed that promise every day since, working herself numb just to survive, too broke and broken to help anyone, including herself. At 7:15 that evening, she was waiting outside her building when Jackson pulled up in the black SUV. He didn't ask if she'd be sure. Just helped her with the single duffel bag she had packed and drove in comfortable silence back to the mansion that was somehow her new home. The formalization happened quickly and professionally. Victor met her in his office at 8, a space of dark wood and leather that smelled like expensive tobacco and old money. The contract was 12 pages long. Claire read every word while Victor worked on his laptop, giving her space to process. The terms were specific. She would care for Owen from 8 each evening until 8 each morning. She would live in the guest suite adjacent to Owen's medical room. She would not discuss Victor's business with anyone. She would not leave the property without security escort. She would follow all protocols regarding Owen's care and safety. The termination clause made her pause. Either party could end the arrangement with 1 week's notice. But early termination by Claire without cause would result in financial penalties that would essentially return her to exactly where she started. "That's a trap," Claire said, looking up from the contract. Victor stopped typing. "That's insurance. I'm investing considerable resources into your mother's care, clearing your debts, providing security. If you decide after 3 days that you don't like the arrangement, I need time to make alternative plans for Owen. 1 week's notice is reasonable. Unless something makes me need to leave immediately. Such as, I don't know, you turning out to be worse than I imagine." Something that might have been amusement flickered across Victor's face. "The clause includes exceptions for unsafe conditions or breach of agreement on my part. You're not trapped, Claire. You're protected. Learn the difference." She signed. The pen felt heavy in her hand, like she was signing away more than just a work agreement. Victor countersigned, made a call, and within 10 minutes, her first week's payment appeared in her account. $15,000, more money than she had seen in one place in her entire life. "Your mother is being transferred to Riverside Care tomorrow morning," Victor said, handing her a folder. "These are the facility details, her new doctor's information, and visiting protocols. Jackson will drive you there on Saturday afternoon. I could take the bus. You could, but you won't. Because part of keeping you safe is controlling your movements until we identify who's trying to kill my son." Victor's tone was matter-of-fact, no room for argument. "Jackson or another member of my security team will accompany you anywhere outside this property. Non-negotiable." Claire wanted to fight it on principle. Instead, she just felt tired. How's Sophie, Nina's daughter? Traumatized but physically unharmed. She's being debriefed by people wet. "Oh, specialize in extracting information from scared witnesses. We should know more about who orchestrated this within 48 hours. And Nina?" Victor's expression went cold. "That's not your concern. You're going to kill her. I'm going to get answers. What happens after that depends on what those answers are." He closed his laptop with deliberate precision. Nina had choices. She chose to poison a child instead of asking for help. Actions have consequences. Claire thought about arguing, about morality and mercy and whether anyone deserved to die for making terrified decisions. But she was living in Victor Kane's house now, accepting his money, agreeing to his rules. She had given up the moral high ground the moment she signed that contract. "Can I see Owen?" she asked instead. "He's been asking about you for the last 2 hours." Owen was sitting up in bed reading when Claire entered, but his face transformed the moment he saw her. Relief and something like joy broke through his usual careful composure. "You came back," he said. "I did. I'm going to be staying here for a while, taking care of you at night." "Good." Owen set his book aside. "Do you know how to play chess?" "Not really. I can teach you. My dad taught me. He says chess is about thinking 3 moves ahead and understanding what your opponent wants." Owen pulled out a magnetic chess set from his bedside drawer. "It's a useful skill." Claire settled into the chair beside his bed. "I bet it is in your house." Over the next hour, Owen patiently explained the rules, how each piece moved, the objective of protecting the king while threatening the opponents. His hands were small and careful as he demonstrated strategies, his voice taking on an instructive quality that reminded her painfully of Emma teaching neighborhood kids about constellations. They played 3 games. Owen won all of them, but seemed delighted rather than bored by her amateur attempts. "You're learning," he said encouragingly after the 3rd match. "You almost trapped my queen that last move." Almost doesn't count in chess. It counts in learning. Owen started resetting the board, then paused. "Are you scared? Living here?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. She thought about lying, decided he deserved honesty. "A little. Your house is very different from where I'm used to living." "Because of the security?" "Because of everything." Owen nodded seriously. "I'm scared sometimes too. Of getting sicker. Of my dad not coming home. Of being alone." He looked up at her with those 2 old eyes. "But I'm less scared when people are honest. Lies feel worse than scary truth." "That's very wise. My mom used to say that, before she died. I don't remember her face anymore, but I remember her voice saying that lying to me about being sick was worse than just telling me the truth." Claire's throat tightened. Your mom sounds like she was smart. Dad says I have her brain and his stubbornness, which is either going to make me brilliant or impossible. Owen smiled slightly. Probably both. The evening settled into routine. Owen's medications at 9:30, carefully triple-checked by Claire against the chart and Dr. Levitt's updated notes. A snack of carefully measured crackers and water. Physical therapy exercises that made Owen wince, but which he pushed through without complaint. At 10:45, Victor appeared in the doorway. He had changed from the business suit into dark pants and a fitted shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. Owen's face lit up. "Story time?" Owen asked hopefully. Victor crossed to the bed, picked up a thick book from the shelf. Where did we leave off? Chapter 7. The protagonist just discovered the underwater city. Victor settled into the chair Claire vacated, his large frame looking almost comical in the child-sized seat. But his voice when he began reading was gentle and expressive, bringing the story alive with different character voices and dramatic pauses. Claire watched from the doorway, seeing this brutal man transform into someone soft for his son. Owen snuggled against his father's side, eyes growing heavy, the fear and pain of illness temporarily forgotten in the comfort of routine and presence. By chapter's end, Owen was asleep. Victor carefully extracted himself, tucked the blanket around his son, and pressed a kiss to the boy's forehead. The tenderness of the gesture made something in Claire's chest ache. In the hallway, Victor's expression shifted back to its usual controlled neutrality. He trusts you already. That's rare. He's a good kid. He's the best thing I've ever done. Victor studied her face. The house has staff, but they know not to enter this wing without permission. Mrs. Vance, the housekeeper, brings meals to the kitchen in the connecting corridor. Jackson bunks in the security room down the hall. Dr. Levitt is on call always. If you need anything, there's a phone system explained in the manual on your nightstand. Manual? Security protocols, emergency procedures, household rules. Read it tonight. Victor started to leave, then turned back. Claire. Owen has nightmares. Probably 2 or 3 times a week. He'll cry out, but often won't fully wake up. Just sit with him, talk to him quietly, let him know he's safe. Don't try to force him awake. Has he always had them? Since Rachel died. They got worse after the first attempt on his life 6 months ago. Victor's jaw tightened. He knows someone wants to hurt him. I've tried to shield him from the worst of it, but he's too smart. He knows. Claire thought about being 7 years old and knowing people wanted you dead. That's too much for a child to carry. Yes, but it's the reality he lives in, and pretending otherwise would be the cruelest thing I could do. Victor held her gaze. Help him carry it. That's what I'm paying you for. He left before she could respond. Claire returned to Owen's room, settled into the reclining chair, positioned to give her a clear view of both the boy and the medical monitors. The house was quiet, except for the soft beep of equipment and Owen's steady breathing. She pulled out the security manual. 53 pages of protocols covering everything from fire procedures to active shooter situations to what to do if Owen stopped breathing. By page 20, Claire's hands were shaking. By page 40, she understood exactly how dangerous her new job truly was. At 2 a.m, Owen cried out in his sleep. Claire was beside him instantly, her hand on his small shoulder. "You're safe," she murmured. "I'm right here. You're safe." Owen's eyes opened briefly, unfocused and frightened. "Mom? It's Claire. You're in your room. Everything's okay." He blinked, awareness returning. "Bad dream. I know, but it's over now." Owen's hand found hers, small fingers gripping tight. "Will you stay?" "I'm not going anywhere." He fell back asleep within minutes, but Claire stayed beside the bed, her hand held captive by a child who had learned too young that people you loved disappeared. She thought about her sister, her mother, her own history of loss. Maybe she and Owen weren't so different. Maybe they were both just trying to survive in situations too big and too scary for the resources they had. At 3, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Through the partially open door, she saw Victor pass by, moving silently despite his size. He glanced in, saw her sitting vigil beside his sleeping son, and something in his expression softened. He didn't enter, didn't speak, just nodded once and continued down the hall. Claire understood. She was being watched, evaluated, tested. This first night was a trial run to see if she would really stay, really care. Really commit to protecting a child who lived in the crosshairs of other people's violence. When Owen's hand finally relaxed in sleep, she carefully extracted her fingers and returned to the chair. Dawn was still hours away. She had a child to watch, protocols to memorize, and a life she had just agreed to that felt both like salvation and trap. But for $15,000 a week and a chance to protect someone who needed protecting, she would learn to live in Victor Kane's dangerous world. At least for now. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment and routine. Claire learned the rhythms of Owen's care, the precise timing of medications, the warning signs when pain was building before he would admit it. She learned which stories helped him sleep and which topics made him animated enough to forget his body's limitations. She learned that he was brilliant and lonely and desperately craving normalcy he had never been allowed to experience. By Friday, Jackson drove her to visit her mother at Riverside Care. The facility was everything the previous place wasn't. Clean, well-staffed, filled with natural light and actual amenities. Margaret Montgomery sat in a comfortable chair by a large window, looking healthier than Claire had seen her in months. This place must cost a fortune. Margaret said, "Care." Fully after they had hugged and settled into conversation, "My new job pays well." "What kind of job pays well enough for this?" Her mother's eyes were sharp despite the illness. "Claire, are you in trouble?" "No, I'm taking care of a sick child. His father is wealthy and generous. All true, just missing the parts about assassination attempts and criminal empires." Margaret studied her daughter's face. "You look tired." "Night shift. I'm adjusting." "You look scared." Claire couldn't lie to her mother's face. "It's complicated, but I'm safe, and you're getting proper care. And for the first time in 3 years, I'm not drowning. Can that be enough for now?" Her mother reached for her hand. "As long as you promise to leave if it stops being safe." Claire promised, knowing it was likely a lie. She had signed a contract with penalties she couldn't afford. But more than that, she had made a wordless commitment to a 7-year-old boy who had already lost too much. Saturday evening, Owen convinced Claire to watch a documentary about deep-sea creatures. He provided running commentary on each species, facts tumbling out with the enthusiasm of a child who had spent too much time reading and not enough time playing. "The giant squid has the largest eyes of any animal on Earth," Owen explained, as a massive creature filled the screen. "Each eye is the size of a basketball. Imagine seeing the world through eyes that big." "Everything would look different," Claire said. "Everything is different depending on how you see it. That's what Dad says. 2 people can look at the same situation and see completely different things based on their perspective." Claire glanced at Owen. "Your dad teaches you a lot of philosophy for someone your age." "He says philosophy is just thinking about thinking." "And I do a lot of thinking because I can't do a lot of running." Owen said it without self-pity, just stating fact. "Do you have kids?" The question landed like a physical blow. "No. Do you want them someday?" Claire thought about Emma, about how loving someone meant risking the devastation of losing them. "I don't know. Maybe. I think you'd be a good mom. You don't treat me like I'm stupid or fragile. You just treat me like I'm me." Something warm and painful twisted in Claire's chest. "You are very much yourself. That's a good thing. Dad says that too. He says the world will try to make you smaller, quieter, more convenient. But being yourself, even when it's hard, is the bravest thing you can do." "Your dad is surprisingly wise. He's also surprisingly dangerous," Owen said matter-of-factly. "But I think maybe you have to be both to survive in our world." At 9, Victor appeared for his nightly visit. It had become routine, this hour where he transformed from whatever he was during the day into simply a father reading stories and answering his son's endless questions about ocean biology and physics and whether time travel would ever be possible. Claire had started leaving the room during these visits, giving them privacy. But tonight, Owen asked her to stay. "Claire should hear this part," he insisted, as Victor opened the book. "The protagonist is making a decision about whether to trust someone who might betray her. It's really good." Victor glanced at Claire, something unreadable in his expression, but he began reading. His voice brought the story alive, the protagonist's internal conflict rendered with surprising emotional depth. Claire found herself drawn in, despite intending to just sit quietly. when the chapter ended with the protagonist deciding to trust despite the risk. Owen looked between his father and Claire with satisfaction. See, sometimes you have to trust people, even when it's scary. Because being alone is scarier than being betrayed. That's one interpretation, Victor said carefully. What's yours? Owen challenged. Victor closed the book. I think the protagonist is brave and foolish in equal measure. Trust is a gift that should be earned, not given freely. But if nobody gives it freely first, how does anyone earn it? Claire watched this debate between father and son, seeing the way Victor's entire demeanor softened in Owen's presence. This was a different man than the one who had coldly discussed Nina's fate. This version was patient, thoughtful, willing to be challenged by a 7-year-old's logic. You make a fair point, Victor conceded. Perhaps trust is a risk worth taking with the right people. Owen yawned, the philosophical discussion wearing him down. Claire is the right people. She stayed even though our house is scary. Victor's eyes met Claire's over his son's head. Yes, she did. After Owen fell asleep, Victor lingered in the hallway outside the room. Claire busied herself checking the medication schedule, trying not to feel the weight of his presence. He's attached to you, Victor said quietly. He's lonely. I'm convenient. He's selective. He doesn't attach easily. Victor leaned against the wall, and for a moment he looked tired rather than dangerous. His therapist says it's a defense mechanism. If he doesn't let people close, it hurts less when they leave. That's a hard way for a child to live. It's the way I taught him to live. By example is not by intention. Victor was quiet for a moment. His mother was warm and open and believed the best in people. I'm the opposite. Owen got caught between those two worldviews and is trying to figure out which one keeps him safer. Claire thought about her own defensive walls, built brick by brick through years of loss and struggle. Maybe he needs both, trust and caution, openness and protection. Maybe. Victor studied her face. You're good with him, better than I expected. Did you expect me to be bad with him? I expected you to be adequate. You're exceeding that significantly. He pushed off from the wall. Jackson tells me you've been reading the security manual cover to cover every night. There's a lot to learn. Most people would skim it and hope for the best. You're taking this seriously. Your son's life is serious. Something shifted in Victor's expression, a crack in the controlled facade. Yes, he is. Thank you for understanding that. He left before she could respond, his footsteps fading down the corridor. The second week brought Owen's dialysis session. Claire had read about the process, but watching it was different. Owen was matter-of-fact about the needles, the hours connected to the machine, the way his small body had to remain still while mechanical filtration did the work his kidneys couldn't. Dr. Levitt supervised, but Claire stayed close, monitoring vitals and keeping Owen distracted with increasingly ridiculous would-you-rather questions. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? Claire asked. Owen considered seriously. What's the terrain? Am I in an open field or an enclosed space? Do I have weapons? You're overthinking this. Strategy matters in any battle scenario. Owen grinned. Dad taught me that. Your dad teaches you a lot of concerning things for a 7-year-old. I'm almost 8, and knowledge isn't concerning. Ignorance is concerning. By the third week, Claire realized she had stopped thinking about her old life. Her studio apartment sat empty, rent now paid automatically from her new bank account. The diner had replaced her. Her mother was thriving in professional care. Claire's entire existence had shifted to revolve around the nighttime hours in this mansion, the careful monitoring of a sick child, the strange comfort of routine in a dangerous place. She also realized she had stopped flinching when Victor entered rooms, had started noticing small things about him, the way he drank his coffee black, but always brought her cup prepared exactly how she liked it. The way his voice changed when he talked to Owen versus when he talked to his security team. The scar on his left cheek that she wanted to ask about but didn't. Late one night, while Owen slept and Claire worked on an assignment for the accelerated nursing program Victor had arranged, she heard voices from Victor's office down the hall. The door was partially open, and though she knew she shouldn't listen, the tense tone made her pause. We have a location on Ethan. Jackson's voice, grim and professional. He's been making contact with the Volkov family, trying to arrange a new alliance. Of course he is. He needs backing to make another move against Owen. Victor sounded tired. What's the timeline? Unknown. But Volkov doesn't do anything without significant incentive. If Ethan is offering him something valuable, we could be looking at a coordinated attack within the month. Silence, then Victor's voice, colder than Claire had ever heard it. Then we move first. I want eyes on every property Ethan has touched in the last 6 months. I want to know who he's talking to, what he's promising, where he feels safe. And when we find him, I want options that end this permanently. Claire's stomach clenched. She moved away from the door, back to Owen's room, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to refocus on her textbook. She was living in a world where people casually discussed permanent solutions to human problems, where a brother was hunting his nephew and an uncle was planning to eliminate the threat. At 3 a.m, Owen woke from a nightmare screaming. Claire was there instantly, gathering him into her arms as he sobbed against her shoulder. "I'm here. You're safe. I've got you." He was here, Owen gasped between sobs. "Uncle Ethan was in my room, and he had a needle, and I couldn't move, and Dad was calling for me, but couldn't find me. It was just a dream. Your uncle isn't here. Jackson is right down the hall. Your dad is in his office. You're completely safe." But Owen clung to her, his small body trembling. What if he gets in? What if next time it's real? Claire had no good answer for that. She couldn't promise nothing bad would happen, because bad things already had happened. She couldn't promise his uncle wouldn't hurt him, because his uncle was clearly trying to do exactly that. So instead, she held him and sang the lullaby she used to sing to Emma, the one about stars and safety and love that transcends distance. Her voice cracked on certain notes, but she pushed through, feeling Owen gradually relax against her. "My mom used to sing to me," Owen whispered when she finished. "I don't remember the song, just the feeling of being safe. That's what matters, the feeling. Do you think she knows? That I'm still here, still trying to be brave?" Claire's throat tightened. "I think if love exists beyond death, she knows everything about you and is incredibly proud." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "Do you believe that? That love continues after death?" Claire thought about Emma, about the way grief felt like carrying a person's weight even after their body was gone. "Yes, I think the people we love become part of us. They don't leave, they just change form." "Like energy," Owen said, his scientific mind engaging. "Energy can't be created or destroyed, just transformed. Maybe people are like that too. Maybe they are." Owen's eyes were closing again, exhaustion reclaiming him. "Claire, if something happens to me, will you remember me? Will you tell people I was brave?" "Nothing is going to happen to you. But if it does," Claire held him tighter, "then yes, I'll remember everything about you. And I'll make sure the whole world knows how brave you were." "Okay." Owen's breathing evened out. "That's good then." He fell back asleep in her arms. Claire stayed frozen, holding this fragile child who had already lived through more fear than most people experienced in a lifetime. She thought about the conversation she had overheard, about permanent solutions and coordinated attacks, and a war being waged around a 7-year-old boy who just wanted to learn about giant squids and beat his father at chess. When she finally laid Owen back in his bed, she found Victor standing in the doorway. She didn't know how long he had been there, but his expression was raw in a way she had never seen. "I heard him scream," Victor said quietly. "Nightmare about Ethan." Victor's hands clenched at his sides. He shouldn't have to be afraid in his own home. But he is, and pretending otherwise doesn't help him. "I know." Victor stepped into the room, looking down at his sleeping son. "I'm trying to end this, trying to make him safe. But every solution I come up with involves violence he shouldn't have to know about." Claire thought about her promise to Owen, about remembering and honoring and protecting. He already knows about violence. You hiding it doesn't make him innocent. It just makes him uninformed. Victor's eyes met hers. "You're very wise for someone so young. I'm 26, and I learned early that pretty lies are crueler than ugly truths. Your sister. My sister. Your wife. Every person who died while people around them pretended everything would be fine." Claire held his gaze. Owen is smart enough to handle truth. What he can't handle is feeling like the adults in his life are lying to protect him. That makes him feel more alone than the actual danger does. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to Owen's bedside, pressed a kiss to his son's forehead, and left without another word. But the next evening, he brought Claire coffee exactly how she liked it and stayed an extra hour reading to Owen. And when the story reached a part about the protagonist's mother dying, he didn't skip it like he usually did. He read it honestly, and Owen listened with tears on his face, and afterward they talked about loss and memory and how love survives everything, including death. Claire watched from her chair and realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was becoming part of something deeper, more complicated, more dangerous than she had ever intended. She was becoming family. The black rose appeared on a Tuesday, 4 weeks into Claire's employment. She found it on her pillow when she returned from helping Owen with his physical therapy exercises. A single perfect bloom with a note attached in elegant handwriting. Pretty thing. Shame about what happens to pretty things around Victor Kane. Claire's hands shook as she dropped the rose like it had burned her. She backed toward the door, her mind racing through implications. Someone had entered her private room. Someone had bypassed all the security measures Victor insisted made them safe. Someone wanted her to know she was vulnerable. Jackson appeared within 3 minutes of her emergency call, Victor 30 seconds behind him. They stood in her doorway, staring at the rose on the floor like it was a live grenade. "How did someone get in here?" Claire's voice came out higher than intended. "You said this wing was secure." Victor's expression had gone cold and lethal. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Full security review, now. Every camera, every access point, every member of staff accounted for. Lockdown protocol until we find the breach. Jackson carefully picked up the rose using a tissue, examined it without touching the petals. No obvious powder or chemical residue, just a message. A very clear message. Victor turned to Claire. "Pack essentials. You're moving to the room across from Owen's until we resolve this. I'm not the target. Owen is. You're connected to Owen, which makes you a target by association. And whoever left this wants you frightened enough to leave." Victor's jaw tightened. They're trying to isolate him by removing the people he trusts. Within the hour, the mansion had transformed into something resembling a military operation. Additional security personnel appeared, grim-faced men and women who moved through the house with practiced efficiency. Every room was searched, every ventilation shaft examined, every staff member interviewed. Claire sat with Owen, trying to keep him calm, while armed guards swept his medical room for the 3rd time. The boy watched everything with wide eyes, his earlier fear giving way to a kind of resigned awareness. "This is because of me," Owen said quietly. "This is because of someone who wants to hurt your family. That's not the same as being because of you. But if I wasn't here, you wouldn't be in danger. Dad wouldn't have to live like this. Everyone would be safer." Claire knelt beside his bed, making him look at her. "Owen Kane, listen to me very carefully. You are not responsible for other people's evil. You exist, and that's beautiful and important. Anyone who wants to hurt you is making a choice that has nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with their own brokenness. But people keep getting hurt trying to protect me. Because you're worth protecting, and the people who love you would rather face danger than live in a world without you in it." Claire squeezed his hand. "Including me, I'm here by choice. I stay by choice. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Owen's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to get hurt. Then we'll both be very careful and let the scary armed people do their jobs." Jackson entered, his expression grave. "We found the access point. Service corridor behind the kitchen. Camera had a 43-second blind spot in its sweep pattern. Someone knew our security setup well enough to exploit it." Victor appeared behind him. "Inside job? Most likely. We're reviewing everyone hired in the last year. Cross-referencing with known associates of your brother. Ethan's getting desperate." Victor's voice carried cold satisfaction. Desperate people make mistakes. This was a mistake. But Claire saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept drifting to Owen. This wasn't just about catching whoever left the rose. This was about the fact that his home, his sanctuary, had been violated. That his son and the woman caring for him were now proven targets. The investigation continued through the night. Claire refused to leave Owen. Even when Victor suggested she rest. She sat in the chair beside his bed, watching him sleep fitfully, while guards rotated through the hallway outside. At 3 in the morning, Mrs. Vance was brought to Victor's office in tears. Claire heard the raised voices, the housekeeper's desperate explanations. 20 minutes later, Jackson emerged looking exhausted. Mrs. Vance admitted to disabling the camera. Said someone has her daughter. Jackson rubbed his face. Sophie, again. Same playbook. Different person's child. Claire thought about Nina, about how easily fear for a child could be weaponized. Is she telling the truth? We're verifying. But yes, probably. Ethan knows Victor's people are loyal, so he finds their pressure points and applies force. The next day brought an oppressive tension to the household. Additional security made the mansion feel like a fortress under siege. Owen wasn't allowed outside, even to the garden he loved. Meals came from the kitchen but were tested before anyone ate. Every sound, every unfamiliar voice, set everyone on edge. Claire tried to maintain normalcy for Owen. They played chess. They read books. They worked through his homeschool assignments. But the fear was a living thing in the room, impossible to ignore. I hate this, Owen said during his afternoon dialysis session. I hate that everyone is scared all the time because of me. They're scared for you. That's different. Is it? Either way, fear is controlling everything. Claire couldn't argue with that. Fear was controlling everything. It lived in Victor's sharp orders and Jackson's constant vigilance, and her own racing heart every time footsteps approached. Tuesday evening, Victor appeared looking like he hadn't slept. He had changed from his usual suit into tactical gear, all black and fitted with equipment Claire didn't want to identify. He looked like what he actually was, a dangerous man preparing for violence. Owen stared at his father. You're leaving. For a few hours. Jackson will be here. 3 additional guards on this wing. You'll be safe. That's not what I'm worried about. Owen's voice was small. What if you don't come back? Victor crossed to his son, knelt beside the bed so they were eye level. I always come back. Mom didn't. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Victor's expression cracked, just for a moment, showing the grief underneath. Your mother's death was an accident I couldn't prevent. This is different. I know what I'm walking into, and I'm prepared. You're going after Uncle Ethan. Victor didn't lie. I'm going to end the threat to our family. Yes. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he threw his arms around his father's neck, holding tight. Please come back. Please. I promise. Victor held his son, and over Owen's shoulder, his eyes met Claire's. In that look was a silent plea she understood perfectly. If something goes wrong, take care of him. Claire nodded once. Victor kissed Owen's forehead, stood and left without looking back. The waiting was excruciating. Claire tried to keep Owen distracted, but he kept glancing at the clock, counting the minutes his father had been gone. 8 became 9, became 10. No word, no updates, just silence and mounting dread. At 11, the power went out. Emergency lights kicked in immediately, casting everything in red. Claire's training took over. She moved to Owen's bed, checked his dialysis machine, which had automatically switched to battery backup. Claire? Owen's voice was terrified. I'm right here. The backup system is working. You're fine. Jackson burst through the door, gun drawn. Stay here. Don't open this door for anyone but me or Victor. What's happening? Backup generators should have kicked in. They didn't. Someone sabotaged them. Jackson positioned himself at the door. We're implementing panic room protocol. Gunfire erupted somewhere in the mansion. Not the sharp crack of a single shot, but sustained automatic fire that made Claire's ears ring. Owen tried to sit up, still connected to the dialysis machine by tubes and wires. We can't move him yet, Claire said, checking the machine's display. He needs 8 more minutes, or we risk dangerous complications. We may not have 8 minutes. More gunfire, closer now. Shouting, the distinctive sound of glass breaking. Jackson grabbed his radio. All units, attackers have breached the main floor. Owen's wing is under direct threat, requesting immediate backup. Static answered him. The communications were down too. Claire made a decision. She began the emergency shutdown procedure for the dialysis machine, moving faster than safe, but weighing risks against certain danger. Owen was crying silently, tears streaming down his face as he watched her work. I need you to be brave. Claire told him. "Can you do that for me?" Owen nodded, his small face determined despite the fear. The dialysis machine beeped its completion. Claire disconnected the lines, applied pressure to the access points, wrapped them quickly. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold. She scooped Owen into her arms. He was light, too light, his body fragile against her chest. Jackson opened the door, checked the hallway. Panic room. Now. They ran. Claire had never moved so fast, her heart pounding, Owen's arms tight around her neck. Behind them, she could hear the fighting getting closer. Footsteps, voices shouting in a language she didn't recognize. More gunfire. The panic room was 30 feet down the hallway. 20. 10. A man appeared at the corridor's end, weapon raised. Jackson fired without hesitation, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The man went down. Jackson grabbed Claire's arm, propelling her forward. They reached the panic room. Jackson punched in the code with one hand, keeping his gun trained on the hallway with the other. The heavy steel door opened. Claire stumbled inside, still holding Owen. Jackson followed, slamming the door behind them. The locks engaged with solid clicks. They were in a windowless room, maybe 15 by 15 feet, with independent power and ventilation. Monitors on one wall showed security camera feeds from around the mansion, though several screens displayed nothing but static. Claire set Owen on the small bed in the corner, immediately checking his access sites. No bleeding. His vitals were elevated but stable given the circumstances. She wrapped a blanket around him, trying to control her own shaking hands. "How many attackers?" she asked Jackson. "At least 8 breached the perimeter. Probably more." Jackson was cycling through the security feeds, his face grim. "Professional team. Military-grade weapons. This isn't some half-planned assault." Owen was watching one of the monitors, his face pale. "Where's my dad?" Jackson checked his phone, cursed. No signal, they're jamming communications. He moved to a panel on the wall, opened it to reveal a backup radio system. "Security teams, this is Jackson. Status report." Static, then a voice crackling through. "West Wing secure but under pressure. Main entrance breached. Multiple casualties. We've lost contact with Mr. Kane's team." Claire saw Owen's face crumble. She pulled him close, covering his ears, but he had already heard. His father was out there somewhere, unreachable, possibly hurt or worse. "He's okay," Claire whispered, more prayer than certainty. "He's okay. He promised to come back." They waited in the red-lit panic room while the sounds of battle raged outside. Owen buried his face in Claire's shoulder, his body trembling. Claire held him and watched the monitors, searching for any sign of Victor among the chaos unfolding on screen. An hour passed, then 2. The gunfire became sporadic, then stopped. The silence afterward was somehow worse than the noise. Jackson kept the radio on, listening to security teams reporting in. West Wing secured. 3 attackers dead, 2 captured. East Wing cleared. Perimeter reestablished. But no word about Victor. At 1 in the morning, Owen finally fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, still wrapped in Claire's arms. She didn't move, didn't wake him, just sat against the wall, holding this child who had lived through a war zone, and wondering if his father would survive to see morning. At 1:47, the panic room door's intercom crackled. "Jackson, it's me. Stand down and open up." Victor's voice, rough and exhausted, but alive. Jackson verified through the camera, then unlocked the door. Victor stepped in, and Claire felt her breath release in a rush she hadn't known she was holding. He was covered in blood, his tactical gear torn, a makeshift bandage wrapped around his left arm. But he was standing, moving, alive. His eyes went immediately to Owen sleeping in Claire's arms. "Is he hurt?" "No. Scared but physically fine. His dialysis completed before we moved him." Victor crossed to them in 3 strides. Knelt down, his hand gentle as he touched his son's face. Owen stirred, blinked awake, saw his father and started sobbing. You came back. I promised." Victor gathered Owen carefully from Claire's arms, Holden. Gave him close despite his own injuries. "I always keep my promises to you." Claire stood on shaking legs, suddenly aware of how much adrenaline had been holding her together. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the crash was devastating. Her knees buckled. Victor caught her with his free arm, holding both her and Owen. I've got you. You're safe. You both are. Claire let herself lean into him for just a moment, let herself feel the solid reality of his presence. Then she pulled back, professional distance reasserting itself. You're bleeding. You need medical attention. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. Claire looked at Jackson. Get Dr. Levitt here, and I need to check Owen's access sites properly now that we're secure. They moved back to Owen's medical room, which had been spared the worst of the attack. While Dr. Levitt examined Victor's wounds and Jackson coordinated cleanup operations, Claire focused on Owen. His access sites were fine, his vitals returning to baseline, but the emotional trauma was written across his face. How many people died? Owen asked quietly. Claire glanced at Victor, who nodded permission to answer honestly. I don't know yet. Some. I'm sorry you had to experience that. Uncle Ethan did this. Yes. Is he dead now? Victor answered that one. No, he wasn't there. He sent people to do his work, while he stayed safe somewhere else. His voice carried bitter anger. But we captured 2 of his men. They'll talk, and when we find him, this ends. Owen was quiet for a long moment. I don't want to be the reason people keep dying. Victor moved to sit beside his son's bed despite Dr. Levitt's protests about his untreated injuries. You listen to me. None of this is your fault. Your uncle's choices are his own. The men who attacked us made their choices. You are guilty of nothing except existing. And you have every right to exist without apology. But if I wasn't here, if you weren't here, my life would be empty, pointless. You are the reason I fight, the reason I survive, the reason anything matters. Victor's voice broke slightly. Don't ever think the world would be better without you in it. It wouldn't. I wouldn't. Owen threw his arms around his father, and they held each other while Claire and Dr. Levitt quietly worked around them. The doctor cleaned and stitched Victor's wounds, administered antibiotics, warned about infection risk. Victor barely seemed to notice, all his attention on his son. Finally, near dawn, Owen fell back asleep, exhausted beyond capacity. Victor refused to leave his bedside. Dr. Levitt gave up trying to convince him to rest properly and simply brought medication and supplies to Owen's room. Claire sank into her chair, every muscle aching. She had been running on adrenaline for 7 hours. Now, in the quiet aftermath, her hands started shaking uncontrollably. Victor noticed. You were remarkable tonight. You kept him safe. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Victor studied her face. You could have frozen, could have panicked. Instead, you executed emergency protocols perfectly and protected my son with your own body. That's not nothing. Claire thought about those minutes in the hallway, Owen in her arms, gunfire behind them. I didn't think, I just moved. Exactly, when it mattered, you chose right. Victor reached across the space between them, took her shaking hand in his. His grip was warm and steady, grounding. Thank you, for staying, for fighting, for being someone I can trust with the most important person in my world. Claire looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Blood spattered, exhausted, eyes haunted by the violence of the night, but also lit with fierce gratitude. This dangerous man was trusting her with everything that mattered to him. I meant what I told Owen weeks ago, Claire said quietly. I'm here by choice. I stay by choice. Even after this, after seeing exactly how dangerous it is? Especially after this. Because if I leave, Owen loses someone else, and he's already lost too much. Victor's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. So have you. So have you. They sat in silence, hands linked, watching over a sleeping child who had survived another attempt on his life. Outside, security teams worked to repair damage and remove evidence of the attack. Dawn crept through the windows, bringing light to a household that had been transformed by violence. But in this room, there was only quiet and survival and the strange intimacy of shared trauma. Claire didn't pull her hand away. Victor didn't let go. And between them, an understanding formed that was deeper than employee and employer, more complicated than protector and protected. They were becoming something neither had planned for, something that both terrified and sustained them in equal measure. They were becoming necessary to each other. The mansion felt different in the days following the attack. Security doubled, then tripled. Armed guards became as common as furniture. Victor moved with a barely contained fury that made even his own men nervous. And Owen stopped asking questions about when things would return to normal, as if he had finally accepted that normal was a luxury his life would never afford. Claire spent every waking moment with him, hyper-vigilant for threats that might materialize from any direction. Sleep became a luxury she grabbed in brief intervals, always with one ear listening for danger. By the third day, exhaustion had carved shadows under her eyes that no amount of coffee could erase. Victor found her in the kitchen at 4 a.m, staring at a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. He looked equally destroyed, his suit replaced by dark pants and an untucked shirt, his usually precise appearance disheveled in a way that made him seem more human. "You need to sleep," he said, pouring his own coffee. "So do you. I'll sleep when my son isn't being hunted by my own brother." Victor's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "We interrogated the captured attackers. Ethan promised them triple payment for a successful hit. He's getting funding from somewhere significant, which means he's made promises to dangerous people." Claire wrapped her hands around her cold coffee cup. "What kind of promises?" "The kind that involve giving up territory and control in exchange for enough firepower to eliminate a 7-year-old child." Victor's jaw tightened. "He's essentially selling pieces of my organization to buy my son's death. That's insane. That's desperation. Ethan knows if I establish Owen's position as my heir, his own claim becomes worthless. He's running out of time and options." Victor turned to face her fully. "Which is why I'm ending this. Tomorrow night, we have a location on one of his safe houses. I'm taking a team to extract him." Claire's stomach dropped. "Extract, that's a nice word for what you're actually planning." "I'm planning to remove a threat to my family, permanently. By killing your brother. By protecting my son." Victor's eyes were cold. "Don't romanticize this, Claire. Ethan has tried to poison Owen, hired assassins to shoot him, sent armed men into our home. He's made his choices clear. I'm simply responding in kind. And what does Owen learn from that? That family members kill each other when they disagree? Owen learns that his father will do whatever necessary to keep him alive. That's the only lesson that matters." Claire stood, facing him despite the intimidation factor of his size and presence. "No. He learns that you're willing to become a monster for him. And then he spends the rest of his life wondering if love always requires monstrosity." Victor's expression darkened. "You don't understand the world we live in. I understand that Owen is 7 years old and brilliant and already carrying more trauma than any child should. I understand that he watches everything you do and learns how to be a man from watching you. And I understand that if you kill your brother in cold blood, even for good reasons, something in Owen will break that no amount of security can protect." "What would you have me do? Wait for Ethan to succeed? Let my son die because killing my brother seems morally questionable? I would have you think 3 moves ahead, like you taught Owen in chess. Ethan dead makes you safe temporarily. But what about the people he made promises to? What about the power vacuum? What about the next person who decides Owen is leverage?" Claire's voice shook, but she pushed forward. "You can't kill every threat. Eventually you have to build something stable enough that threats don't matter." Victor stared at her for a long moment. "You have no idea what you're asking. I'm asking you to be the man Owen thinks you are. The one who reads him stories and teaches him philosophy, and tells him being yourself is the bravest thing you can do." Claire held his gaze. "Be that man when it's hard, not just when it's easy." He said nothing, just stood staring out the kitchen window at darkness gradually giving way to dawn. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "My wife said something similar, the night before she died." Claire waited, sensing this was important. She told me that Owen would need a father, not a weapon. That if I let the violence of my work consume who I was as a person, I'd lose the only things that mattered. Victor's hand tightened on his coffee cup. 3 hours later, her car went off a bridge. Brakes failed. Professional job made to look like an accident. Ethan? I've never been able to prove it. But yes, probably Ethan. Testing to see if eliminating Rachel would make me weak, distracted, easier to overthrow. Victor's voice was hollow. It did the opposite. It made me ruthless. And for 4 years I've told myself that ruthlessness is what keeps Owen alive. Maybe it is, but it's not what keeps him whole. Claire moved closer, close enough to see the grief etched into every line of his face. Owen doesn't need you to be invincible. He needs you to be present. And if you die tomorrow night trying to kill your brother, or if you succeed but lose yourself in the process, you're leaving him alone either way. Victor looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. I don't know how to keep him safe without violence. Then find people who do. Build alliances that don't depend on fear. Create systems where Owen's value isn't just as your heir, but as himself. Claire took a breath. Or accept that safety is an illusion, and focus on giving him a life worth living instead of just keeping him alive. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of grief and fear and choices that couldn't be unmade. Finally, Victor set down his coffee cup and scrubbed his hands over his face. You're asking me to change everything about how I operate. I'm asking you to evolve. For Owen. Victor laughed, but it was bitter and exhausted. You've been here 5 weeks and you think you understand my world well enough to restructure it? I've been here 5 weeks watching a little boy try to build a life around the edges of your war, and I think he deserves better than edges. Claire's voice gentled. I think you want to give him better. You're just afraid that anything other than absolute control means losing him. Because it does. The moment I show weakness, someone will exploit it. The moment you show humanity, you give people a reason to support you beyond fear. There's a difference. Victor stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Maybe she was. Maybe in his world, humanity was a foreign concept, something that had been beaten out of him by years of survival and loss. But then he surprised her. Come with me. He led her to his office, unlocked a drawer, pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs. Rachel, alive and laughing, holding an infant Owen. Rachel and Victor at what looked like their wedding, both younger and softer than the people they would become. And a final photo of Owen, at maybe 3 years old, sitting on his mother's lap, both of them reading a book together. This is who I was before, Victor said quietly. Before Rachel died. Before I decided love made you vulnerable. Before I chose control over everything else. He touched the photo his wife's face. She would agree with you. She would tell me I'm failing Owen by teaching him to survive instead of teaching him to live. You're not failing him. You're learning. That's different. Victor closed the folder with careful precision. If I don't kill Ethan tomorrow, he'll keep trying to kill Owen. Probably. But maybe there are options between doing nothing and murder. Such as? Claire thought fast, pulling together pieces from security briefings she had overheard and crime documentaries she had watched in her old life. Ethan needs money and support to keep coming after Owen. What if you cut off his resources? Expose him to the families he's making deals with. Make him too expensive and too unstable to back. Destroying him financially and politically instead of physically. Leaving him alive, but powerless. Which keeps your hands clean for Owen's sake and removes the threat long term. Claire met his eyes. And if he's alive, you can always escalate later if needed, but you can't de-escalate from death. Victor considered this, his strategic mind clearly working through scenarios and outcomes. It's riskier, takes longer, gives him more opportunities to make a successful attempt. Everything is risky. But this way, Owen doesn't have to grow up knowing his father murdered his uncle. That's worth something. After a long moment, Victor nodded slowly. I'll talk to Jackson. See if we can pivot the operation from extraction to intelligence gathering. Build a case against Ethan that makes him radioactive to potential allies. He looked at Claire with something that might have been respect. You're either very brave or very foolish to lecture me about morality. Probably both. Someone needs to, and I'm apparently the only one stupid enough to try. Victor's expression softened into something almost like a smile. Owen is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. He gives me a reason to be brave. So do I, Victor said quietly. Have you? You make me want to be better than I am. The words hung between them, intimate and dangerous. Claire felt her heartbeat accelerate, awareness of how close they were standing. How alone they were in the early morning darkness. Victor's eyes held hers, and she saw exhaustion there, and grief, and something else that made her breath catch. Victor, she started, not knowing what she was going to say. A small voice from the doorway interrupted. Dad, Claire, I had a bad dream. They stepped apart instantly. Owen stood in the kitchen entrance, wearing his planet pajamas, his face uncertain and scared. Victor crossed to him immediately, scooping him up, despite the boy's protests that he was too old to be carried. What was the dream about? Victor asked gently. You were gone, and Claire was gone, and I was alone in the house with all the broken glass and blood, and nobody came when I called. Owen's voice cracked. I woke up and you weren't in your room, and I got scared. I'm right here. We're both right here. Victor held his son close, and we're not going anywhere. Owen's arms tightened around his father's neck. Promise? Victor's eyes met Claire's over Owen's head. In that look was a commitment, a choice being made in real time. I promise. No more unnecessary risks. No more operations that could take me away from you. Really? Really? You're more important than revenge. More important than control. More important than anything. Victor kissed his son's forehead. I'm sorry I've made you feel like you had to compete with my anger. Owen pulled back to look at his father's face. Does this mean Uncle Ethan wins? No, it means we're going to beat him differently, smarter, safer. Victor glanced at Claire. Someone recently reminded me that the bravest thing you can do is be yourself, even when it's hard. So I'm going to try being a father first, and a businessman second. See how that works. Owen's face transformed with hope, so pure, it made Claire's chest ache. Can I help? I'm good at strategy. You are exceptionally good at strategy. Tomorrow we'll sit down and think through this like a chess game. Figure out how to protect our king, without sacrificing all our other pieces. Our king is you, Owen said seriously. The pieces we can't sacrifice are everyone I love. That's you and Claire and Uncle Jax and Dr. Levitt and Mrs. Vance. Victor's expression flickered with surprise at being included in the list of people to protect, rather than the protector himself. Then we'll build our strategy around keeping all those pieces safe. They returned to Owen's room together. The three of them crowded onto the medical bed, while Victor read from the ocean biology book until Owen fell back asleep between them. Claire found herself studying Victor's face as he read, seeing the transformation in real time as he chose presence over violence, connection over control. When Owen's breathing evened into sleep, Victor carefully extricated himself from the tangle of limbs. He paused beside Claire, his voice barely a whisper. Thank you for believing I could be better than I've been. Thank you for proving me right. Victor's hand found hers, squeezed once, then let go. He left the room quietly, but something fundamental had shifted. Claire could feel it in the air, in the quality of silence, in the way her heart beat steady and sure, instead of racing with constant fear. The war wasn't over. Ethan was still out there, still dangerous. But the battle lines had changed. Instead of meeting violence with more violence, they were going to try something harder and braver. They were going to try being human. Claire settled into her chair beside Owen's bed, watching the sunrise paint colors across the walls. In the growing light, she could see the tour taking shape. Not perfect, not safe, but possible in a way it hadn't been before. Owen stirred in his sleep, reaching out automatically. Claire took his small hand, held it gently, and made a silent promise to both the sleeping child and the broken father trying to heal. She would stay. She would fight. She would believe that love could be stronger than fear, that family could be chosen, not just inherited, that damaged people could build something beautiful if they were brave enough to try. And watching Owen sleep peacefully for the first time since the attack, Claire thought maybe they already had. 3 months passed like pages turning in a book Claire hadn't known she was writing. The mansion transformed from fortress under siege to something resembling a home. Victor kept his promise, restructuring his operations to require less direct involvement, delegating to trusted lieutenants, choosing strategic dismantling of Ethan's support network over direct confrontation. The results were slower but more permanent. One by one, Ethan's allies disappeared as Victor's people exposed financial improprieties, leaked damaging information, made supporting the younger Kane brother too expensive and too dangerous. Ethan became toxic, his promises worthless, his threats hollow without backing. Owen turned 8 in early March. The party was small but real, held in the mansion's garden with 3 children from his hospital support group and their parents. Claire watched him laugh and run, carefully but genuinely, his body still fragile but his spirit becoming stronger. Victor stood beside her, his hand resting casually on her lower back in a way that had become familiar over the weeks. They hadn't discussed what was growing between them. This thing that was more than employer and employee but existed in undefined territory neither seemed ready to label. "He's happy," Victor said quietly. "He is. You did that. We did that." Victor's thumb traced small circles against her spine. "I couldn't have gotten here without you." Jackson approached with his phone extended. "Boss, you need to see this." The news report showed a body pulled from the harbor. Ethan Kane, dead from apparent gang violence. Multiple gunshot wounds, found in an area known for criminal activity. The report speculated about power struggles and internal conflicts within organized crime families. Victor's expression remained neutral as he read, but Claire saw the tension in his shoulders. When he handed the phone back to Jackson, his voice was carefully controlled. "Interesting timing." "Very interesting," Jackson agreed in a tone that suggested nothing about this was coincidental. Cleo didn't ask. Some questions existed in the space between what she needed to know as Owen's caretaker and what she could afford to know as someone choosing to love dangerous men. She suspected Victor had made a final calculation, decided that some threats couldn't be dismantled, only eliminated, but he had done it quietly, at a distance, in a way that kept his hands technically clean for his son. She told herself it was pragmatism. She told herself Owen was safer now. She told herself that moral absolutes were luxuries that didn't exist in the world they inhabited. Mostly, she told herself she could live with not knowing for certain. Owen tugged on his father's sleeve. "Can we have cake now?" Victor's face transformed instantly, the cold calculation replaced by gentle affection. "Absolutely." Claire spent 3 hours making sure it was kidney-friendly and delicious. "We should definitely eat it." The party continued. Children laughing and parents chatting and normalcy asserting itself in small, precious moments. Claire cut the cake she had researched obsessively, making sure every ingredient was safe for Owen's restricted diet. He declared it the best birthday cake ever, which made the effort worth every second. That evening, after the guests had left and Owen had fallen asleep surrounded by his new books and toys, Victor found Claire in the kitchen cleaning up. He took the dish from her hands, set it aside, and pulled her close. "Thank you," he said against her hair, "for giving him a childhood, for giving me a reason to be better." Claire leaned into him, breathing in his scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. "Thank you for letting me stay, for trusting me with him. I trust you with everything." Victor pulled back to look at her face. "Claire, these past months, having you here, watching you with Owen, I've realized something." Her heart started beating faster. "What?" "That I don't want this arrangement to be temporary. I don't want you here as an employee who could leave with a week's notice. I want—" He stopped, seeming uncertain for the first time since she had met him. "I want you to be part of this family. Permanently." Claire's breath caught. "Victor, you don't have to answer now. I know it's complicated. I know I'm asking you to commit to a dangerous life. To a man with a violent past. To a child who will always require extra care. I know it's not the future you imagined when you were in nursing school dreaming of normal things. I stopped believing in normal things when my sister died," Claire said quietly. "And I stopped believing I deserved happiness when I couldn't save her. But Owen makes me believe again. You make me believe again. This strange, complicated, dangerous life we've built together feels more real than anything I had before." Victor's eyes searched her face. "So that's a yes?" "That's a yes to staying. Yes to being part of Owen's life. Yes to being part of your life." Claire took a breath. Yes to building something together, even though I'm terrified of losing it. Victor kissed her then, gentle and thorough, a promise written in the press of his lips against hers. When they broke apart, he was smiling in a way she had rarely seen. Owen will be thrilled. He's been asking me for weeks when you're going to officially be his mom. Claire laughed, tears pricking her eyes. I'm not trying to replace Rachel. You're not. You're giving him something new. A different kind of love, equally important. Victor tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He needs a mother, I need a partner. And you need a family that chooses you back. We fit. They did fit, Claire realized. In all their broken, jagged pieces, they had somehow assembled into something that worked. Not perfect, never safe, but real and worth fighting for. The next months brought new routines. Claire finished her nursing degree with honors, studying in the quiet hours while Owen slept. Victor continued restructuring his organization, going increasingly legitimate in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. Owen's health stabilized enough that doctors began discussing transplant options with cautious optimism. And Claire realized one morning, watching Owen teach Victor's bodyguards about marine biology with the passion of a child who finally felt secure enough to be fully himself, that this was happiness. Messy and complicated, and built on a foundation of trauma and survival, but happiness nonetheless. Claire, Owen called from the garden, where he was examining something in the pond. Come look at this tadpole. It's growing legs. She joined him, kneeling in the grass beside this boy who had become hers in every way that mattered. Owen pointed out the tadpole's developing limbs with scientific precision, explaining the metamorphosis process with vocabulary that would impress a high school biology teacher. It's transforming, Owen said, becoming what it's supposed to be. Dad says that's what our family is doing too, transforming into something better. Your dad is very wise. He is now, he wasn't always. Owen looked up at her with those two old gray eyes that missed nothing. You made him wise, you made him remember how to be happy. I think you did that, actually. No, I made him scared and protective and careful. You made him happy. There's a difference. Owen returned his attention to the tadpole. I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you're going to be my mom officially. Claire's throat tightened. They hadn't told him yet about the adoption papers Victor's lawyers were preparing. How did you know about that? I'm 7. I was 7. Now I'm 8 and I pay attention. Owen grinned. Plus I heard you and Dad talking last week about legal stuff and family and forever. I'm smart, remember? You're too smart. There's no such thing as too smart. Just smart enough or not smart enough. Owen carefully released the tadpole back into the pond. I think we're all smart enough now. We figured out how to be a family, even though none of us started out planning to be one. That's very philosophical for someone who just turned 8. I've had a lot of time to think about life and death and what matters. Turns out what matters is people who stay. You stayed. Owen hugged her suddenly, fiercely. Thank you for staying. Claire held him. This remarkable child who had taught her that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about choice and commitment. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for teaching me how to be brave. You were already brave. You just needed someone worth being brave for. Victor appeared on the garden path, having finished his afternoon meeting. His face softened when he saw them together. The two people who had transformed his life from survival into something worth living. What are we examining? He asked, joining them by the pond. Tadpoles becoming frogs. Transformations. Becoming what you're supposed to be. Owen looked between his father and Claire. We're like that. We were tadpoles before. Now we're becoming frogs. Or maybe dragons. Dragons are cooler than frogs. Victor laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Dragons are definitely cooler than frogs, and more dangerous. But we're the good kind of dangerous now, right? The kind that protects people instead of hurting them? We're trying to be, Victor said carefully. Every day we choose to be better than we were yesterday. That's the best any of us can do. Owen nodded seriously, then brightened. Can we have movie night tonight? The documentary about bioluminescent creatures is available now. Of course, Claire gets to pick the snacks since I picked last time, and apparently popcorn with that much butter isn't kidney-friendly. Everything Dad picks is unhealthy, Owen confided to Claire. It's because he didn't have someone making him eat vegetables when he was growing up. Is that so? Claire tried not to smile. It's absolutely so. I'm basically raising him and you at the same time. It's exhausting. Victor scooped Owen up despite his protests, holding him upside down while the boy shrieked with laughter. Who's raising whom now? Still me. Being upside down doesn't change facts. Claire watched them play, father and son, both of them learning how to be lighthearted after years of being weighed down by fear. This was what she had fought for. This was what made every dangerous choice, every terrifying moment, Esley's sacrifice worthwhile. That evening, the three of them crowded onto the couch in Owen's room, watching glowing jellyfish drift across the screen, while Owen provided commentary on biochemical processes that created light in living organisms. Halfway through, he fell asleep between them, his head on Claire's lap, his feet in Victor's. He's getting bigger, Victor noted quietly. Stronger. The dialysis is working better now that he's less stressed. He's happy. That helps everything. He is happy. Victor looked at Claire over their sleeping child. So am I. I didn't think I'd get to be happy again after Rachel died. Thought that part of my life was finished. And now? Now I'm learning that happiness doesn't replace grief. It just coexists with it. I can miss Rachel and love you. I can honor what was while building what is. Victor reached across Owen to take Claire's hand. You taught me that. You taught me a lot of things. You taught me things too. How to be strong. How to fight for what matters. How to build a life from broken pieces. They sat in comfortable silence, the documentary playing forgotten while they watched Owen sleep. Levitt had mentioned earlier that week that a potential kidney donor had been identified, that they might be looking at transplant surgery within the next 6 months if everything aligned properly. The possibility of Owen healthy, truly healthy, felt almost too enormous to comprehend. But Claire let herself imagine it. Owen running without getting winded. Owen attending regular school with other children. Owen growing up to be whatever he wanted to be. His body no longer the primary limitation on his dreams. Whatever happens, Victor said quietly, as if reading her thoughts, we face it together, the three of us, as a family. As a family, Claire agreed. 2 months later, the call came. A donor match, ready for surgery. The next weeks were a blur of preparation and testing and careful hope. Owen was terrified and excited in equal measure. Victor was controlled anxiety wrapped in expensive suits. Claire was the steady center, holding them both together through doubt and fear. The surgery took 14 hours. Claire and Victor waited in a private room, not speaking much, just holding on to each other while doctors performed the delicate work of giving Owen a chance at a normal life. When Dr. Levitt finally appeared, exhausted but smiling, Claire felt her knees go weak. The transplant was successful. The kidney is functioning properly. Owen's in recovery and asking for both of you. They ran. Owen looked small and pale in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors surrounding him. But his eyes were clear when they opened. Did it work? It worked, Victor said, his voice breaking. You're gonna be okay. Like really okay? Run around okay? Go to school okay? Essentially, yes. Really okay. Owen smiled, then immediately fell back asleep, exhausted from trauma and medication. Claire and Victor stood on either side of his bed, each holding one of his hands, united in release and gratitude and cautious hope. The recovery was long but steady. By Owen's 9th birthday, he was attending school part-time, making friends, living a life that approximated normal. He still took medications, still needed monitoring. But the shadow of imminent death had lifted. Claire watched him run across the soccer field during recess one afternoon, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze, and felt tears stream down her face. Victor's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. We did it, he said quietly. We gave him a life. He gave us a life too. Gave us a reason to become better than we were. Victor kissed her temple. Marry me. Claire turned to stare at him. What? Marry me. Make this official. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Victor smiled. Owen's been asking when the wedding is going to be. Apparently, we're moving too slowly for his taste. You're proposing at our son's soccer practice? I'm proposing at the moment I realized I can't imagine any future that doesn't have you in it. The location is irrelevant. Claire laughed through her tears. Then yes, absolutely yes. They married quietly 3 months later, just family and close friends. Owen served as best man and spent the entire ceremony grinning like he had personally orchestrated the whole thing. Which, in a way, he had. None of this would have existed without a sick child who needed help and a waitress who had chosen to care. Standing in the garden, where Owen had once shown her tadpoles transforming into frogs, Claire married a man she had once feared and committed herself fully to a life she had stumbled into by accident. Victor's vows were simple and heartfelt, promises of partnership and protection and choosing love over fear every single day. When they kissed, Owen cheered loudly enough to make the adults laugh. Finally, he announced to the assembled guests, "Now we're officially a family. It's about time." Jackson, standing beside Owen, with his arm still occasionally in a brace from old injuries, smiled. "Kid's got a point, you two took forever." The reception was joyful and chaotic, and everything a celebration should be. Claire danced with Owen, with Victor, with Jackson, who moved carefully but determinedly. She talked with her mother, who had tears in her eyes watching her daughter so thoroughly happy. She accepted congratulations from Victor's business associates, who had learned to respect her as much as they respected him. As evening fell and guests began departing, Claire found herself alone with Victor on the terrace, the sounds of the party fading behind them. "No regrets?" Victor asked, pulling her close. "Not a single one. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner, that Owen had to suffer before we could build this." Victor looked out at the garden, where their son was teaching other children about pond ecosystems with boundless enthusiasm. "But maybe we needed to be broken first to understand how to heal." The future stretched ahead, uncertain and challenging, and absolutely worth fighting for. Claire leaned into her husband, watched their son shine bright and alive under the stars, and knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice that night in the diner. When instinct told her to check the medication, when fear told her to run, but courage told her to stay, when survival told her to protect herself, but love told her to protect him instead, she had saved Owen's life that first night by stopping him from drinking poison. But he had saved hers by teaching her that family wasn't something you were born into, but something you built with choice and commitment and courage. And in the building, they had all become exactly what they were meant to be. Not perfect, not undamaged, but together and healing and home.